afternoon, everyone, and welcome once again to today's class. Um, we, my name uh, remains, my name remains City Bello. We started this class last week. We have met. So I'm still the same person, and just like I said last week, we'll be taking you through the rest of this class. Though, like I said, we're supposed to be it's supposed to be two of us, but Tosin is still unavailable. So, last week we started with cloud concepts. That's the first topic or the first module in cloud computing. The first module in Azure fundamental. As so there we defined cloud computing to be the process of running or the providing or delivering of computing services over the internet. And then we went further to talk about the cloud computing model. We have there are three main model, or there are three of them. Yes, like you said, there are others, but we focus mainly on three of them, which are the public cloud, the private cloud, and then the hybrid cloud. And we say public cloud is a cloud service that is made available over the internet in a global scale, like in a large scale or larger scale that can reach a larger audience compared to private cloud, which is mainly usually set up and owned by a single organization or just a few set of people. And then the third option, the third cloud model was the third cloud model was the hybrid, which hybrid is the combination of the public cloud and then the private cloud. So we also took a step further to define the type of cloud, the common cloud services, which are the infrastructure as a service. Infrastructure as a service, we said it's just the same thing as you having your own infrastructure that's setting up everything. It has to do with you having the server, managing the application, managing the update, managing the security, managing everything around it. And then we also talk about the platform as a service that we say it's usually used by developers, where they just want to run their code and they want the code either to just be supported by whatever language they have decided and whatever database, whatever underlying infrastructure that will be. They really don't want to know. All they want to do is just to be able to write their code, deploy it somewhere, test it, monitor it, and do all they have to do without having the headache of they patching the server or setting up the operating system or any other thing of such. And the third one is the software as a service, which we said is majorly set up already by the cloud service, and everything inclusive is already set up. The only thing is you now have to manage your users. You need to manage how your users access the services and the security. So what we say in essence is that there is less management overhead when it comes to software as a service. An example of such is Office 365. So we describe also the core benefit of the cloud services. And then where we want to pick up from this week is to pick up from the that's comparing the different cloud services. So if you look at the screen in front of you, IaaS, that's infrastructure as a service, is one of it that we've talked about extensively already. One of the things that differentiates it from the rest of the cloud services options or services that are available is the fact that it's the most flexible in terms of management, is the most flexible. Why? Because let me say about 75% of the management overhead falls on you as a customer, while the service provider is only taking care of things like the underlying infrastructure, like the data center, the power, the cooling, the physical networking, physical security, and all of that. So you get to configure your own services and manage the hardware, even though you do not have physical access to the hardware. But via the virtual machines that you create, we'll take the virtual machines also. Each virtual machine you create is treated as a server, as an hardware, also on its own. So you are responsible for taking care of all of that. And then the differentiating factor for the platform as a service is the fact that it focuses on application development, it focuses on developer, it focuses on operations, and not, uh, um, and not the maybe the initial setup or the infrastructure. It doesn't focus on infrastructure. It just focuses on the application and then development. So is the management of this aspect is mainly by the service provider. So they will take care of the operating system, the hardware, the runtime, uh, uh, um, the virtualization technology. They will take care of all of that. You just bring in your code and then you can start running it. Then we have the third option, which is the software as a service. Now, you will ask that software as a service is a pay-as-you-go model. Each of them are actually a pay-as-you-go model. So there's really no difference here. If you are going for infrastructure as a service, you will also pay as you go. So it also means you don't get to pay for what you are not using. But what really differentiates them here is the fact that if you are taking infrastructure as a service, for instance, if you set up a virtual machine, whether you use that virtual machine or not, you are going to be paying for it. But if you are talking about software as a service, let's say you have 50 users currently that you are purchasing or you are subscribing for a particular service, Office 365 to be precise. Or for example, you are subscribing to Office 365 for just 50 users. And then in few months, you added about 5 extra users. All you need to do is just add 5 extra licenses that will cater for those 5 additional. Let's say in the next few months also, 5 people left your organization or 5 people leave the company to go somewhere else. You can also, at your next renewal, you can actually scale down also, or even take that license and then reassign it to some other people as time goes on. So in essence, you are actually paying for only the software that you are using, only the services that you are using at that particular time. So now we can talk about cloud really without talking about the responsibility that is without talking about the responsibility that come along with it. So one thing uh, uh, that the customers need to pay attention to is what's my role in the cloud? What role do I have to play when it comes to managing the services, when it comes to managing the infrastructure and all of that? What role do I play? So this screen really is just showing you where your responsibility lie of and where that of the service provider also lie. So um, for instance, excuse me. For instance, if you look at the screen, you'll see that the slide on your screen have like 2 color coding. We have the green color code and then we have the blue color code. Everything on the green, it's what you have to manage. Take the first item to your left. That's the on-premise, which is a private cloud aspect of cloud services, if we must say. If you notice right from the storage, from the networking, to the computing, to the physical building itself. Physical building is not listed here. Things like generator is not listed here. Things like fire extinguisher or fire service and all of that is not listed here. But all of that are all your responsibility, up to application and how your users access them. Now, if we move to the infrastructure as a service, like we said, infrastructure as a service is the commonly used form of the commonly used type of cloud service, and then is the most flexible services. So you have more control uh, as you will have on the on-prem. So if you look at from the if you look at the up the ladder or down the ladder, you have the storage, the networking, the computing, whose responsibility falls on the service provider. They have to provide all of this for you. They are not going to, you are not going to be the one to provide the physical infrastructure. They will provide the physical server, install the operating system on the server, enable the Hyper-V, hypervisor technology that they want to use on it, and then afterwards, they give you the access to start spinning up your own virtual machine, whatever operating system you want your virtual machine to run, whether you want it to run a Windows operating system or you want it to run a Linux operating system. Then we move to runtime. You have to decide that. You have to decide which application you want to actually put on that particular server and how your users will be able to access that particular application that you have put on whatever virtual machine that you are kind of that you have set up in the infrastructure as a service. And when you look at the platform as a service, you see that it's reducing. Your responsibility is kind of reducing there. The only thing you get to manage is you get to bring your own application, and then you get to bring your data and you get to manage your data and access. So here now, the service provider at no time does not have access to your data. They rely on you yourself to be able to manage your data, to be able to manage who and who have access to it. So the identity of whatever you are hosting in the cloud actually following you. So identity, access, and management, they follow you. And when you look at the software as a service, you don't even have anything. The only thing you have is they have provided everything. They've provided the application, they've provided the infrastructure, just like Exchange. You don't have to start installing Exchange for your email. All you need to do is you have subscribed to Office 365 and you automatically have access to Exchange services, and your user can continue to send and receive email as they used to. So, going forward or going further, let me use something that we are really familiar with. Recently or some time ago, a an IBM staff about Baron came up with an analogy to be able to explain this shared responsibility to people, to be able to for them to easily understand what that shared responsibility we are talking about. So you use something that is common that almost everybody know. Even if you have not eaten pizza before, at least you know what they call pizza. And it's not just pizza alone. You can also use other things like car as a service to also analyze this. So looking at the shared responsibility model using the pizza analogy, you look at it this way. If you have to make pizza by yourself in your house, you are responsible for everything. You make the dough, you get all the ingredients that is required depending on the flavor of that pizza that you are looking forward to. You get your gas, you get your oven, you get your oil, your pan, your baking pan, and everything. You have to get it. That is what they call homemade pizza. So you make it by yourself to your own taste, of course, to your own taste, and then when you finish it, you serve it and people can eat. So comparing now to infrastructure, that is equivalent to when you have your own data center in your own on-prem. That's the private cloud option. You have your data center. So comparing infrastructure as a service now, looking at the ladder from the bottom, the pizza people like Domino Pizza, Debonair Pizza, and which other pizza outlet are out there. So they are responsible to make the dough, get all the ingredient that is required to make the dough, get the ingredient like the tomato sauce and all of that. So the only thing is what they have to tell you is, okay, so this one now is they've made the dough already, or let me not say maybe you go to a store. Now you just pick it up, you pick all of those things up. They've already made the dough. When you get there, sometimes you see that you have already made dough. You have even toppings that you can add to it already. So you are not going to be the one to start kneading your dough, mixing the flour with sugar, with everything. You won't be responsible for that. They've already done that. So the only thing you get to take care of, you buy that dough and you take it home. Now, when you get home, you need to prepare the pizza. So in terms of getting the fire ready, having your oven or gas, whatever cooking means you have, it's your responsibility. And then when you finish, you need to set up the dining for those that will eat the pizza. Then you have the platform as a service where they've prepared everything. You just go there to the a Domino pizza, for instance. Now you tell them this is what I want, and they prepare it for you. And then you ask them, okay, I need a drink on top of it. So that's like sides. You call it sides or maybe drink. Or I need this other extra thing with it. Serve me. And then you sit there at Domino Pizza store and you eat the pizza. They set your table for you and you eat it. And then when you now come to the software as a service aspect of it, they have prepared everything and they set the table. You just come, eat it, or sorry, I missed it. That's the third one, the platform. They give it to you, you go home and set up your table. But the last one, which is software as a service, you order it and you sit down there, you eat it, and when you finish, you go home. So looking at this, you are able to easily relate it to the shared responsibility that we discussed previously in this slide. The same thing, it works that way. So that's I would say that's how best I can kind of explain the principle of the shared responsibility when it comes to cloud services for us. So now, apart from virtual machines, databases, and those Office 365 and all of that, one other cloud services that is also provided is what we call serverless computing. So serverless computing just allow you to run your own application or your code without creating or configuring anything. Now let's go back to platform as it's similar to platform as a service, quite all right. But platform as a service, you still have to configure certain things. The only thing you are not burdening yourself is installing the application, unlike you would do for infrastructure. But here now, just on serverless computing, everything, even the runtime, you don't care what it is running. You just want to bring your code and you run it. And one thing with serverless computing is that it scales automatically by itself based on demand. It scales by itself. So you are not going to be maintaining the server, and you're not going to be maintaining the application. You're not maintaining the database. You are just running code. An example of that, this is just two of them. There are a whole lot of services under serverless computing. Is Azure Function. So Azure Function allow you, let me say, let's see, you have a code already that you just want to do is just to deploy it. That's all. All you need to do is just bring it for Azure Function. It's very similar to platform as a service, like I said. So majorly is coding. You write code and then you push it. For Azure Logic, on the other hand, you will take that like your like automation. That is just majorly for automation. So automation in terms of this action need to happen from my code. let's say I deploy a website, for instance, and on the website, uh, when people click, when they click a particular button, maybe I say contact us, the contact us button, they click it. I need something to happen at the background. What I'm saying is when they click that page, when they click the contact us, you can give them like a form that they will fill. And that form, the moment they fill it finish, there's now, you can create a logic that says once the form is filled and they click submit, send that form maybe to so person's email address. Or if you send it to you, or you can take the content or a particular content or item or property from that form and perform a certain action further on it. So that is what you use Azure Logic for. It's just the logic. When this happen, if this happen, this will happen. If this kind of action occur, this will happen. So majorly, you're just automating tasks. You are using it to configure workflow. Yes, that's the key word, workflow. When I take, okay, so when I create a virtual machine, you are saying when I create a virtual machine, the moment the user create a virtual machine, okay, there are a lot of things that happen at the background. Network adapter is attached to it. You're not seeing all of that. Firewall is attached to that virtual machine. If you have selected operating system while you are configuring, whichever operating system will automatically be installed. Those are logic that is saying based on what people click, these actions will happen, or these actions will be performed on that particular thing that people, or page, or on that particular thing that people have done. So that is just what serverless computing is really all about. So probably before we jump now to module 2, we are starting module 2 now. I just want to ask, I drop a guide for us on the charts for you to be able to create your own Azure subscription. I don't know if we have done it, or do you, even if you already have access to a subscription, just let us know. Let me know rather. So if we have done it, you can just drop a message if you have. But if you have not done it, I will encourage us to do that because, okay, that's good. Thank you. Those that have not done it, on this chat, be in the channel already, there's a document that has been posted that will guide you step by step on how you are going to set up your own Azure subscription for you to be able to try things out on yourself. Then, do you have any question also before we move further? Okay, so I guess there's no question. So we'll just move forward. Now, moving on to, okay, yes, Bukola, please unmute yourself to speak.
Sorry, under Azure function, it says it creates infrastructure based on an event. Help explain that.
Your voice is not that clear.
Can you hear me? Is it better?
Yes, it's better now.
Yeah, I said under Azure functions for this serverless computing, it says here that it creates infrastructure based on an event. Could you please explain that line further?
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
So, all right. So let me see. Let's see the best way to explain this. I'm trying to so okay, okay, okay. So now let's take for instance, I talk about we having a website, right? You have a website, so that's also function also work in that process. You have a website, or let's say you want to build a web API, that's application programming interface, to be able to generate some some events or some items. Yes, maybe from another service or from another application or from another solution. So you can say if the web app, you have built the API, rather, you build the API and then you need to connect it. Now, when somebody, for instance, that API you build, let me give this example. You have a website and then you build an API. You want the API to connect to Office 365 or Azure AD, for instance, such that when a user click login, you want that's is like a trigger. When a user click login, you want the ability for them to go to Azure AD and go and retrieve that user's information, like maybe check the Azure AD if the user information is available there. Then they will check. So if the user information is there, then confirm if the user have access to access this particular service that is trying to access. So you check, yes, the user can access it. Then the next thing, if the user cannot access it, it will need to perform an action. So it's based on event, in the sense that something must happen before Azure function take kick in. I don't know if am I able to explain?
So the word there is actually create.
Yes, something must happen. The word there is create.
Okay, it says create. I was wondering. Okay.
Okay.
Create.
All right.
Thanks.
Yeah. So continuing. So now module 2, which is core. Now we are moving deeply now to Azure, which is core Azure Services. So under this module, we are going to be describing the architecture of Azure. That's how it's set up, what and what, the behind the scene of all the components or all the services that made up Azure. We're going to talk about it in terms of the data center setup, the underlying infrastructure, the kind of resources. We are going to talk about them. Then we'll talk about the core Azure resources, which are the compute, the networking, the storage, the databases. There are a whole lot of other resources. But just for the basic, we are going to stay basic. It's just for us to understand that there are lots. But questions, let's say if you are taking your exam, questions might come from, most of these areas. And that is why we are going to be talking about them. So let's start with Azure architectural components. Under this, at the end, we'll be able to understand what regions are. Then what we call availability zones, the Azure resources, what we call resource groups, Azure Resource Manager, subscription, and then the management, Azure management groups. So we're going to touch each of those areas. So let's start with region, right? So region, Azure region, you will take it, the way Azure work is, it uses geography, right? It uses geography. When you go to your map, on the world map, for instance, you have different area on the map. Those area, each of those area, or that combine or contain group of people, is referred to, they are referred to as geographical locations or geography. Now, within the geography, or each geography fall within a region. Sorry, a minute, please. So, sorry, apology for that. Trying to I needed to quickly sort out someone here. Okay, so I was talking about region. So, okay, let me start. Let me put it this way. Azure actually is made up of multiple data centers located in across the globe now. So each time you leverage a particular Azure service, right? Um, Maybe for instance, Azure SQL or VM, you are actually setting up each of those services on using a physical equipment that is located in a particular locations around the world. And like I said Azure make use of geography. So it divides the world, let me put it that way now, it divides the world into geographical locations that are now that are like boundaries or country borders, you know. So it is I will say the geography there now is like a market that is containing two or more regions that preserve, you know, that preserve data residency. So, and when we talk data residency now, and then for you to also better understand, if you look at today, for China, their data reside, China's data reside in China. So China's data cannot go out of China. Likewise, you have maybe a law now in Nigeria that says certain data should not leave the soil of Nigeria or should not even leave the soil of Africa. So you will take that as a geographical location. Now, what Azure also do, now within that geography, you can have different regions. Let's say you have on the geography, you have America, you have Europe, you have Africa, yeah, you have Middle East, right? So within US, that's America, is divided now into different, or I would say sub-region. What we have first described is a geography or a boundary. Now we are defining them, we are breaking them down further now into region. Under US, you have what we call Central US, you have what we call East US, you have West. Europe, the same thing. You have the North Europe, you have East Europe, you have Central Europe, and all of that. Those are regions. Now, within each of these regions, you have different countries, right? Each of these different countries can host one or more data centers. So what Microsoft or Azure did is to host multiple data centers within a particular region. That way, you are able to host your services and spread it across either multiple data centers within the same region or multiple data centers across multiple regions. We'll talk a bit more about what we call region pairing. So a region represents really a collection of data centers, like I said, in a region, West Europe, for instance, you can have multiple data centers there, just in that region alone. They can now be spread across different countries, which each of the data center in a region, they are about 300 miles far away from each other. And the way it's set up is set up in such a way that the latency between each region or even each data center within a region is very low. It's reduced to the barest minimum so that people can processes or requests or traffic can travel as fast as it could be. Now, what is the reason for creating multiple regions? Is also the ability to give customers, users of cloud, the ability to be able to host their servers or their services as close as possible to their users. That is one reason. Another reason, like I said earlier, is what we refer to as data residency or compliance for reason. So if a government, each of those regions have policies that is governing them, that is guiding them, where the government say certain data cannot leave the soil of their country, or certain data cannot leave the soil of that particular region, cannot move. So everybody knows, or people will say, oh no, I don't want US to have access to my data, right? So in that case, I do not want to host. If I'm setting up anything in Azure, I would like to select a region other than the US. So you can pick region like Europe, and there's also South Africa now. So that is really what region is. It's a collection of multiple data centers within a particular geography. So moving on. Now let's talk about region peering. In order for you to be able to to be able to have what we call availability, right? Microsoft employ the service or the option of region peering or region peers. So now we have, if you look at the screen, like I was saying earlier, you have different regions. You have geography rather. Geography like the US, the Europe, the US, Europe, Middle East, Africa, you have them that way. Now, in each of these geography, you have your different regions. Regions is inclusive, regions like North US, West US, North Europe, West Europe, UK, Germany, and so on and so. So what Microsoft did is they try to pick a region now and pair it with another region. So what it means is services running in one region will also be running in another region. And each of the data centers that are within each of the region, they run their own physical infrastructure, network, uh, um, servers, irrespective, and even internet. They are independent of each other, such that when one region, let's say there's a disaster that causes a particular region, the whole of the region to go down, which is rare. But in case of maybe a tsunami or something, it is very possible. So the other region that is peer with that particular region will always take over your service. Now, for this to happen, depending on the setting you have when you are setting up your service in Azure, actually. So for region, when you look at it, because of the peering, there is replication that is going on for a lot of services that support such technology. So updates also, it also have to do with when updates have to happen. You recall or remember that the service provider is the one responsible for maintaining certain services or uh, uh, certain infrastructure when it comes to the services you are subscribing to. So let's say they need to upgrade or update a particular data services in a particular data center. You have to be able to kind of have access to your services. That should be that what they do is because of replication that have happened. So your access or your service automatically fail over and then to another region. All of this is behind the scene. You don't see it or you don't know what's happening, but it's majorly for failover scenario. So there are a whole lot of terminologies that we need to understand here. When we get to availability set, you will be able to. Now, sorry, is this okay? Now let's talk of availability option. Availability here is talking majorly about high availability. That's what it's just talking about. So uh, um, look at the on-premise scenario. You have just a single server that is hosting an application. If that single server go down, your service is down. So whatever service you are rendering from that particular server is down, and you won't be able to do anything, until you bring it back up. So, but then if you want that service, if one server go down, the service should not be affected in any way. You'll be talking about high availability. So high availability can exist in different forms. There's availability within a single data center. There's availability across multiple data center, and there's availability across multiple regions. So recall that Microsoft also give you some level of SLA and says your service will always be up. Because they know also things will happen. That's why they didn't give you the 100% that you have 100% service level agreement. They kind of reduce it. If you look at the first one, if you have a single virtual machine, a single virtual machine is going to offer you just 99.919, SLA. We'll have to calculate that to kind of maybe get how much downtime can occur in a year. Give me a minute, please. Let me quickly get that. So, where's my browser? So, sorry, just like I said, if you have 99.9, if you have, I think I have this one, if you have 2 9, it means in a month you can accommodate like 4 minutes downtime, and in a year can be like 8 hours or so downtime. So it depends. So based on the option you choose when you're setting up your resources in Azure, it also tells the SLA, the backing XLA that go along with it. And the different services in Azure have different SLAs that are available. Now, talking about this availability option, when we move further, you will understand, we will talk about availability zones. Now, looking at the middle one, you have multiple virtual machines. What they have done here is to put the virtual machine in what we call availability zone. Availability zone, what it does is to protect failure against a total data center failure. Single machine, you can have one machine in a data center. If it fails, you have to either spin it or get it back up, or you set up two virtual machines within the same data center. When one fails, you bring up the other VM that is still functional. So you're only taking care of just failure within a single data center. Now, when we talk of failure within multiple data centers, you are talking about availability zone. So just like we talk about region, in a region, you have multiple data centers. And region 1 is pairing with region 2. That means if region 1 is down, all services automatically kick off from region 2. Now, within region 1, I have this set of data centers. Let me say I have like 3 data centers in region 1 alone. Region 2 also have 3 data centers. Now, in data center 1 under region 1, I have 2 virtual machines that are running. If I have enabled, availability zones on my virtual machine, it means it's going to make a copy of that virtual machines that I set up, or that service that I set up on data center 1. It's going to make a copy of it on data center 2 or 3. So that means I have 2 data centers at least that is hosting my data. So if a total data center 1 fail, service will continue from data center 2. Now, if I go further to select a region and enable what would they call geo redundancy? Geo redundancy now help you to spread or make a copy of your resources across different regions. If I enable geo redundancy, recall we said regions, we cannot talk about it without talking about geography. So the moment you enable geo redundancy, what it does is it make a copy of your services in multiple data centers across multiple regions. So that way you are protected from single resource failure, data center failure, region failure. So that is what majorly availability option is. So when you're setting up, you have to actually select. Now, availability zones, I've talked a little about it in the previous slide. Availability zone, they are physically separated locations within an Azure region. Again, I said it previously. They are physically separated locations within an Azure region. So now, if you look at this screen, you have 3 availability zones, and each of the availability zones contain multiple data centers. So looking at the screen, you will notice availability zone 1 is linked to zone 2 and is linked to zone 3. You notice the services that are running in zone 1 is also running in zone 2 and is running in zone 3. So like I said earlier, it protects against downtime due to data center failure. So if data center 1 fail now, it's going to automatically move to data center 2. Let's say the entire data center in that zone fail, is going to fail over to another zone. And each of these zones now, so now what it means is I have so many data centers within a particular region, and I group them into zones, so that even while one data center is backing up the other data center, I can say these 3 data centers here, or these 2 data centers here, to also be backing or be a backup for another group of 2 or 3 data centers. And those ones will also be a backup for another group of 2 or 3 data centers. Now, if anything happens, all that data centers that in those availability zone fail, this particular region fail, then it fail over to another region. So each of them, each data center in each region, they are actually running with independent resources, independent infrastructure in terms of power, cooling, networking, physical security, and what have you. And they are also interconnected with fiber optic. Fiber, if we are familiar, if we know what they call maybe dark fiber. Dark fiber is the fastest form of connectivity. You can, in fact, I don't know, the pipe is so fat that depending on the devices you use, you can actually do things within seconds. And those are the kind of infrastructure that is set up between Azure data centers for users to be able to call service and they get response as quickly as possible. So now let's talk about Azure Resources. Azure Resources, they are actually components. And what are these components? They can be virtual machines, it can be storage, it can be virtual network, it can be application service. App service, really, what is running behind app service is IIS. If you're familiar very well with Windows Server, one of the roles on Windows Server is IIS. So app service uses IIS to host whatever application that you want to host. So another resource is function, Azure function. We'll talk about it. Azure databases. Each of these resources, they are also having different type of they are further broken down rather into different, into different components. They further broken down into different components. Now we have resource group. A resource group, really, I would say it's a container or a folder where you put, or so I say, yes, it's a container or a folder where you dump a lot of things. And it can be that you can create Azure resource or resource group to host maybe similar tools or similar services. You can also create a resource group. Probably what you are trying to do is to set up an app service. You want to host a website, for instance. Your website is running maybe ASP.NET, is using ASP.NET or .NET language. Then it's going to be needing database, whether SQL database, Oracle database, MySQL, my SQL. That's what it's going to be using. Then it's going to be sending, using Azure Events. So Azure Events is helping you. It can help you to send text messages. It can help you to generate alerts. So Azure Events is a type of a type of Azure function or serverless computing. So then you will need storage, maybe to save files or to save pictures that the website is going to be calling. So what you can do is to create a resource group. And when you create that resource group, every component that help you host this Azure that make it to run effectively will be in that single resource group. And one thing is, each time you create a resource group, you must assign that resource group to a particular region. You cannot create a resource group without specifying which region you want this resource group to be. So you can also create one of the reasons you will also create a resource group is for management purposes in terms of security. You want to be able to create policy that apply to whoever is going to be accessing resources in that resource group. So you might have different resource groups that have been created. But now one resource group is hosting it contains all resources for the infrastructure team or the system administrator team. Another resource group contains all components that are being used by the developers. Another resource group contains all components that are being used by the finance department and all of that. So you can also be able to say, this particular resource group, resources in this resource group can only be accessed by each of those groups, and they cannot have access to any other resource group that does not belong to them. So, like I said, it can exist. You can create resource group within the same tenant. You can create resource group that span or that is hosted in different regions. And you can also move. Let's say you have created a resource now in a particular resource group. You can kind of move that resource. If there's need, you can actually move it out of the original resource group where it was created and move it into another one. What you are doing in essence, you are just changing the container or the location where you are hosting that particular resource. That's really what resource group is all about. So, um, uh, like I said, is also majorly basically because you also want to be able to control who is accessing that particular resources that are being created. So, moving on, we have Azure Resource Manager. Azure Resource Manager just provides a management layer that enables you to create, to update, and to delete resources in your subscription. If you look at the Azure Resource Manager from this screen, beneath it, you have your different computing the different services that you are subscribing to. You have your data, you have your app service, you have your virtual machines, you have every other tool that you have actually subscribed to within this. Each of these are hosted in a particular subscription that you have created. Now, for you to be able to manage each of these resources, whether it's a virtual machine, whether it's a database or storage that you have created, for you to be able to manage them, you actually need a tool to be able to connect. And for you to use that to connect, you have different ways. One of these is to go through the Azure portal. Azure portal is the commonly used, is the graphical user interface for you to manage your Azure services, for you to create, to delete, to monitor, even to access services or applications that are deployed into Azure and made available for consumers or for people to consume it by third party. It's not just Microsoft. The good thing about Azure is the fact that it's not only Microsoft services you can host there. You can host Microsoft, you can host other services from other vendor, from other service providers. Because like I said last week, Azure really, all these big service providers, they are further being leveraged on by the smaller service providers. So take for instance, if I want to set up a service that I want general public to be able to access, instead of me setting up my own infrastructure to start setting up data center, I might not have the money that the big guys out there, like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, that they have to set up multiple data centers in multiple regions. So mine might just be just a single data center. Then I put all my resources. The only thing I need to ensure I do is to put internet that people from wherever place they want to access it, they are able to access it or they are able to reach that service over the internet. But then for me to start having a headache of, taking care, monitoring, hard drive failure, network failure, switch failure, everything failure, I can just say, okay, let me leverage on the big guys like Azure. I go to Azure, spin up all those services, configure automation behind it, configure it to expand or reduce, configure the provisioning such that when people click a button for my own particular application, it's doing things behind, like creating a virtual machine, attaching a network to it, creating maybe Azure AD alongside with it, creating different, linking it to different other resources behind the scene. So that is what I can then do. I can just go to Azure and go and do that. And what that means is I'm now going to be benefiting from all the security, the compliance policies that apply to Azure. Recall, for you to be a service provider, you need to meet certain certain regulatory policies, privacy policies. You need to ensure you put all of that in place. So what I'm leveraging if I'm going to Azure is that I already have that because Microsoft already have that. So it covers me as well. It covers every resources that I'm hosting. So it means I don't have to go separately to go and also get certified. But I can do it if I want, of course. But just because I'm hosting my services that people are also using, I'm also somehow responsible for people's data because I'm the one at the end of the day, I'm the one managing the resources that I'm hosting in Azure for my customers to come and access. So I still have to take care of it. So there are different ways by which I can connect to those resources to work on them. So the most common one is the Azure portal. And then you can use what we call the REST API, REST client, to be able to. So REST API is like a package that you deploy that give you an interface that allow you to go and call for something within Azure. But before you can be able to connect to Azure and collect certain information, it will give you, you will need what we call security token. So is this security token that will be used as a username and password to be able to get into that particular service for you to be able to retrieve that information that you're talking about. Then you have Azure Azure PowerShell. Azure PowerShell is built on top of SDK for you to be able to connect using commands. If I don't want to use the normal graphical user interface, I want to use commands. So I can use PowerShell. I can either use my Windows PowerShell, or when you go to Azure, they've introduced the Cloud Shell. That's Azure CLI, the Cloud Shell that you can spin up right within your browser there and connect to Azure services with the different resources and manage them just like you would on the um, on the browser, on the graphical user interface where you can see a lot of things. Now, Azure subscription that provides you is actually an account that you can. So without a subscription, right, you cannot set up any service. You cannot spin up any service. You cannot create any resource in Azure. You need a subscription for you to be able to. That subscription is like money. It's like a it's like funds. It's just like you have your money in the bank now. You now tell the bank, okay, I'm giving an order. Set this particular money aside. I want to use it for this particular purpose. That is what majorly the subscription is. You pay sum of money or you have certain amount of money. It can be that your card is associated with that subscription so that as you are using it monthly, Microsoft is removing their money monthly. Probably you have subscribed that you want to use the service for a year. What they do is they don't remove the money for a whole year. They remove it month by month so that if before the 1 year, the 12 months elapse, you decide you do not want to use that particular service again, what you can then do is to stop the billing. You stop the billing and then you stop paying for that particular service. And you, as a user, you can actually have multiple subscription to your account. You can have multiple subscription under your account. And you can also connect resources between different subscriptions. However, before you can do that, you might need to set up a form of subscription peering or a form of VPN within Azure there. That's VPN to VPN. You spin up gateway from the two of the subscription and then create a VPN tunnel between them so that you can access resources across multiple subscriptions. So it generates separate bill, it generates a report for you. If you look at the screen, you have your Azure account, right? Under your Azure account, you have a subscription that is dedicated for development purposes. So your developer, this is where they come to create their application, write their codes, and test it themselves. Then once they finish, they roll it out to the test environment. They redeploy or move it to the test environment. This test environment is where you have group of testers or even some set of users. You can say you're doing pilot. You move some set of users into this test subscription for them to start testing that particular service that you have set up there. And then once the tests and corrections are being made and everything is fine, is now what the user wants, you move it to production subscription. So what you are trying to do is, while you are doing testing, because testing subscription is usually cheaper compared to production. So while you are doing testing, you are not spending so much in the testing. While you are doing testing, rather, you're not spending so much until you move it really to the production environment. So what people do majorly is to request for test environment from Microsoft. So that way you reduce how much an organization will spend when you come to development and testing before you go to production. So it also allows you to be able to create like access, that's controlling what is happening or what can happen within a subscription. That's also a way for you to do that. So you can further do what we call role-based access control to manage the subscription. Recall that for you to have your resource, you must have a subscription. Now, within your subscription, you must create a resource group for you to host that resource. If you want to create a resource now, you will be asked to select a subscription that you are creating the resource in, and the resource group where that resource will be hosted. You need to select it while you are creating. So they are all intertwined. And then for you to have a subscription, you must have an Azure account. So for those of us that have already created a trial account for ourselves, I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about. But by the time we start exploring, we'll also be able to kind of see what I've been talking about. So now, what we are going to do is to quickly log into Azure and kind of walk you through the services and what the screen look like. Give me a minute. I think I have, which account do I have there now? I have to reshare my screen to share this lab. 3 minutes, please. Okay, I have this guy here. So I'm going to reshare my screen very quickly. How much? Okay. Gosh. Am I still sharing? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I just call up a browser. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see office.com, right?
Yes, office.com. Yeah, okay. You're seeing it. I'm just going to sign out of that account and sign in with my trial account. Yes. So we'll go to portal.office.com. Sorry, portal.azure.com and log in with this. Have this account created. Okay, so if it's your first time that you're signing into Azure, to always bring you to a place like this. And right from home, you can kind of see, you can see the services, that you can quickly, create. Create a resource button. It's right there on the home. If I click here, all services, I'm sorry. Okay, if I click all services, if you look to the right, towards the left rather, you will see all the services blade. And going under the category, you have general services, you have computing services where you have virtual machines, you have the Azure function, you have disk, that's storage, you have so you have your app service, you have your availability set, so you have a whole lot, and container app. So container app, this is under is a form of serverless computing. Also, that's container service. Kubernetes service is a form of serverless computing as well. So Kubernetes service or container service, what it does is it's group multiple virtual machines. So it's configure what we call load balancing or cluster. Yes, it creates a cluster of virtual machines. Within the same cluster, you can have so many VMs running different applications or different services. So majorly also developers make use of that very well. You see networking, like I said earlier, each of the categories have, or each of the service type also have sub-services under them. So under networking, for instance, you have your virtual network. This virtual network represents your physical switch that you have in the office. It's a switch. Yes, you have your load balancer to be able to load balance, different services. You have your application firewall. You have DDoS. So what does DDoS do really? It helps you to protect against denial of service attack. And denial of service attack happen whereby you have a web server now and you need people to be able to log in and retrieve information. An attacker sits somewhere and get hold of that your website server. And what it's doing is just sending traffic, continuous, like thousands of traffic within seconds. So what the server will be doing, because this traffic is legit, what is going to be doing is going to take his time to be responding to that attacker, because the request that is sending is actually legit. So he will be responding to the attacker. Meanwhile, the people who really need access to the services on that server, their request will never be responded to, because the server is trying to take his time to respond one at a time to each request that comes to it. So you have your application gateway. Application gateway is like application firewall that allow you to be able to protect is in front, or you place this in front of whatever application you are hosting in Azure, and it's able to protect against any form of attack. And this is another one called WAF, that's Web Application Firewall. So the way this one works is you have a web server that is sitting down in Azure. Then in front of it, you deploy Web Application Firewall. Now in front of it, you can have your gateway. When people come from outside, they try to access that particular web server that you have. What they are automatically accessing, seeing is a URL for this web application firewall. And it's the web application firewall will receive that request, but instead of allowing the user's request to go directly to the web server, it will change more like a proxy that request and go on behalf of the user, get what the user wants, and get the result and send it back to the user instead of the user directly interfacing with your application. So this is where you can spin up different services. If you talk of even third-party services like SendGrid, for instance, SendGrid is used to send email, is used for email sending even within Azure, or for email relay services, really. So you can actually get it here. That's a third-party service that is not a Microsoft service, like I said earlier. So Microsoft here have what we call marketplace. So people can deploy their solution into the marketplace, and their customer in turn can come into the marketplace to buy services, and they will also do the pay as you go model that is applied. Virtual reality, mixed reality, Internet of Things. Internet of Things really have to do with you monitoring, hardware. How Internet of Things works these days. It all started with a PDA, right? Personal devices. And then before you know it, laptop came up. Laptop was added, desktop, then laptop was added, or phones was added before laptop were added, and all of that. So now some fridge can actually go to the internet. They have network already attached to them. Some TV can go to the internet. So for what is making all of that possible, to be able to go out to the internet and request information or request data or send data to the internet, is what we call Internet of Things. So that's when probably if we go deeper, we'll be able to talk maybe a lot more about it. I talk about the management. So this is majorly the management portal that you have for Azure. You have here on the top here, you have the shell, the cloud shell that I talk about. So if you are the type that love to run command, that love to run scripts, that love to run PowerShell, all you need to do is make use of the Azure cloud, the cloud shell. So this one is okay. So the cloud shell, most of the time I like to use the PowerShell option because I understand the PowerShell, what it is. And before you can use it, you need to create like a kind of storage that hosts piece of this data or the command, the script, because you are going to be installing certain things like like a database for you to be able to get the supported command you will be installing. So you will need like a storage. So what you first need to do is to create a storage for that. So we won't go further. So if you want to create a virtual machine right now, just go to compute, and you can also just come here and search for whatever resource that you are looking for. It will bring it out. Sorry, like virtual machine, for instance. So as you're typing, it automatically brings related thing based on what you are typing. So if I click virtual machine now, this is where I manage my virtual machine if I'm using the GUI. So I can just quickly create a new virtual machine. And while I'm creating it, I need to select the operating system that I want. So you go to new, and then you click new. So now it's going to ask me, this is what I talked about the other time. you need a subscription for you to host the virtual machine. And under your account, like I said, you can have multiple subscriptions. So you can select which of the subscription you want to create that particular resource that you're about to create to. And recall also we talk about a resource group. We say resource group is like a container that help you, that group similar resources or resources that are related, interrelated to each other. It's not necessarily that they are related to each other. There are times that they are not related, but you just want to host it there. So right now I do not have any. I'll have to create a new one. And while I'm creating, let me call it test resource group. I click yes, I've created a resource group there called test. Now I need to give a name for my virtual machine. At the same time, notice here, I need to select region. Which region do I want that virtual machine to be hosted? US, Europe. And when you also look at the costing against each of these regions, some resources in some region is cheaper than the same resource in another region. So if cost is an issue and your data residency is not a problem for you, then this you can also make option based on, okay, this service is cheaper here than here. You notice you have Korea, you have is China on this list? No, China is not here. China have their own special URL that they will use to access their own. So that's how you select. Now, we talk about availability options also. So if you come here, you see availability zone. So physically separate resources within an Azure region. Then you see scale set. So you can distribute your VM across different zones and different fault domain. So there's in Azure also there's what we call fault domain and update domain. So what does fault domain mean? Fault domain means this particular region or this particular data center, things can happen there, or the disaster can happen, or a data center where disaster happen is actually referred to as a fault domain. So this availability option, like we have said, is actually protecting you against different failure type, and you have the availability set. So you want to have your VM across multiple data center. Then when you create, now see the security type. Already there's a standard one that will come with it, which is like the basic one, the free one. So if you need extra to select anything other than the standard, they are going to be charging you for it. So Microsoft will charge you for it as well. Then you have image. The image is talking about the operating system that you want to use. Is it a Windows? Is it Linux? Is it Oracle? And whatever operating system you want to use on that particular virtual machine is what you will select. And as it's creating it, it automatically spin up with that particular operating system. Then you need to select size. So this is what we talk about, the fact that you can increase and reduce size. So if I pick right now, if I pick standard DS2, there are a whole lot of other sizes that you can pick from. So if I pick standard DS2 right now, and I realize later that I need more than 8 gig of RAM, I need the existing. All I need to do is just go to the VM after I've created and go and change the size. And me changing the size user does not even know that anything is happening. It doesn't bring the service down, just increase the size. And when I see that, oh, I'm not using so much on it again, I can go back and reduce it, further again. Now, you need to create an admin account when you are creating a virtual machine. The admin account that will be able to connect. And how do you want to connect? Do you want to use a key? Now, if what you are setting up, if the operating system or the image you are picking is a Linux, automatically you might be using XSH. So you either want to use a password or you want to use a key. So it's the choice is yours. If I just speak, you can also spin us Windows 10 if you want to have a client in Azure to test whatever is it that you are doing. So this image, okay, sorry, it was just a message. So now I need to create, just like when you install your operating system, you need to create a password for the local administrator on that particular machine. So this credential that is asking for here is for the local administrator account. And this is just how you can kind of uh, create very quickly your resource. And when you finish, you need to now go to, let me just put something so that we can move forward. uh, Test AD, let's call it, let me go. Okay. Can you give me, like, I need to quickly change my location. Just give me a minute. All right, sorry for that break. Back. So I just quickly, put something. Sharply. Mm. Oh, what's happening? Oh, okay. So you also need to select which port. This mainly firewall. So you want to know whether you want to enable RDP. So if it is not a Windows machine, there's no point of enabling opening this port 3389. Is for you to disable that and select SSH. But if you didn't enable any port, if you didn't turn on any port here, or you deny all the ports, what it means is they won't be able to connect. Nobody will be able to connect to that VM until you go and enable a port that is required for them to connect to that particular virtual machine. Then you have licensing. So you can bring your own license actually, which is called hybrid benefit. But where you do not have, because we are doing trial now, so even the operating system license is going to be deducted from this particular $200 that you have. So I'm not enabling hybrid benefit because I do not have. Next, I will go to a disk, to the disk section. Now I want to select which storage I want that machine to have. So natively is going to have a standard HDD of 127 gig in size. So yeah, now this is now that's not operating this the disk option. So for the disk, if I leave it, it's going to select just standard. But now I do not want to select standard. Maybe for my money not to run out very quickly, I'll just select, standard HDD. And there's difference between using your HDD and using SSD. SSD is actually very fast. Now there are two types of SSD. There's the standard one and there's the premium one. Premium SSD storage is the most expensive, form of storage out there. So, and then if you notice, selected VM size support premium disk. We recommend premium SSD for high ops workload. Virtual machine with premium SSD qualify for 3 nines SLA. So right now you use standard. Microsoft will still protect you, but before that you must enable availability set and all of that. So, but if you want to get this 3 nines, you need to use premium SSD, which is more expensive. So delete with VM. So these are just settings that you put in place. Majorly what we came here for is the storage. Then we can click next. Just like I said, when you create a virtual machine, there's a lot of things that are happening behind the scene. So network, if you didn't do anything, if you didn't change anything here, you see that it has already created a switch called test VNet. So test VNet is a switch. Every machine that you assign this test VNet to will be able to get IP in this subnet and be able to talk to each other. So that is the way it works. So all of these IP, they are all under networking. Then the port, we are here again for the port. Security, this is just basic. If you want advanced, which will make the service to be, or your VM to be more expensive because of the advanced that you're using. Load balancing, this will apply where you select maybe your redundancy and all of that. That's where you, then let's go to management now. Now, under management, you see you can enable monitoring. Uh, uh, you can enable monitoring. You can enable, identity uh, um, you can integrate it with Azure AD so that whoever want to log in is an account that is associated to this tenant Azure AD. So you can configure auto shutdown. So for your own case now that you have a trial that you're using, and we want to be able to use that trial at least for the duration of the class, right? What you can do is when you spin up a VM, configure it to automatically shut down when you are not using it. It will automatically shut down. So each time you turn it on, if I configure auto shutdown, it will ask me what time of the day or of the night do I want it to be shut down. So when I shut it down 7 p.m. for instance, the next morning is going to bring it up again and it will shut down again at 7 p.m. again. So that's the way it works. That way, you also need to enable that so that you can be able to save your money and then it can last us for a long time. So you can just, put your different settings as you want it, use different settings, then create a tag. A tag helps you to quickly identify resources or set of resources that are related, to one another, or you can also use it to just to quickly identify a resource or to give insight to what that particular resource is being used for. So once you click review and create, it's going to create the VM. The agility in it is very, very fast. So it's going to be very fast at creating validation required. This is just kind of to walk you through how quickly you can create a virtual machine in Azure or create any other resource for that matter. So also on this page, you have the directory. Each time you create, once you create an Azure account, there's a tenant that is automatically created for you, and that tenant have a domain that is assigned to you, a default domain. The domain always carry on Microsoft until you add your own domain. If you must use your own custom domain, like maybe you have tt.com as a domain that you have been using before, and you want your website that you want to host, you want it to have is people to just go to www.tt.com. So you will need to bring your own domain. And what this particular domain or Microsoft domain also give you, it automatically create an Azure Active Directory for you. So if I go here right now, if I search right here and search for Active Directory, then you will see it on the list as well. Select your Active Directory. Yes, you can discard it. Select your Active Directory, and here you see you have your users, you have your groups. You can create users and groups here. You can invite guests to come and make use of the services in Azure or in your tenant as you created. So you can reset users password, delete user, manage user. So that's what this directory, the default directory, is kind of talking about here. The directory that is, you notice, saying you are connected. So somebody also from their own tenant can invite you into their tenant. You will now have the option here to switch between, you see, switch directory. If I say switch directory, it will take me to the list of directory that I have access to, and then I'll be able to select that particular directory that I'm switching to. So that's in a nutshell. Then let's see Azure Azure Marketplace. So if I go to Azure Marketplace, I talk about it's not just Microsoft solutions that are available in Azure. So this is Azure Marketplace, and in Azure Marketplace, you can get services from other vendors or other OEM. Like this is these are Microsoft services. If you look at this first one, they are not Microsoft. This is VIA codes, a company called VIA Code, Data 3 Limited, Cloud Data, and this where you can also leverage, create your own solution that people will subscribe to or that you want to sell to people, and then bring it here into the marketplace. So things we have here, they are called managed service. And what it means is you are using Azure infrastructure really, Most of the time, whenever people want to use this service, it's create underlying server like virtual machine, depending, or web app for whoever the customer is, depending on the automation that they have put behind the solution that they are hosting. So it's going to do that. So part of how they are able to, me as a user, come and click this, and as I click to subscribe to maybe the service, there's things at the background is Azure function, and that does part of those underground work. So this is that regarding Azure. So now we go to my subscription, for instance, subscription. So like I said earlier, you can have multiple subscriptions. You can add extra subscription here, and you can create policy. So I will go to manage policy, and under the policy, I can have subscription leaving. Oh, no, sorry. Under the policy, so subscription either leaving or entering into the Active Directory. But really, let's click on the subscription. This is subscription. I can manage this subscription by myself. So here, under access control, is where you can kind of come and invite people or add people within your organization and give them different kind of access that you want them to have. This user currently is the owner of this subscription. If I click, what I want to do is either add a role or a co-administrator, or I can create my own custom roles. You create a role, and within the role, you add different permission sets. So that's what people can do and what they cannot do. So if I just click create a role now, you see there's a owner role, there's contributor role. So each of those roles have what and what they can do. If you click the view detail, you'll be able to see granular, what and what this contributor role, what right or what access, what permission it gives to user. Some areas they can only read, in some areas they can read and write. If you give anybody contributor or owner access, they can create anything within your subscription and make use of it. So that's granular role-based access control work here. If the person you are giving access to just needs to be able to work on Kubernetes services, the only thing you need to give is to give them access to just Kubernetes service, and they will be able to manage just that. However, sometimes it can be tricky. If you give some level of access, you might need to maybe make it custom for you to get exactly what you are actually looking for. So this is how to assign role and manage your subscription. That's who have access to what within the subscription. Talking about security, this where you see it. Now, if you have created resource group, I'm just going to go back. So for this subscription, you can enable different kind of security for it to protect whatever is it you are hosting. And you notice resources here. Each resource, they are already carrying, maybe telling you how much a particular resource that you might be creating may kind of cost you. So what we talk about in terms of being predictable around cost, this is it. Because you know what each resource you are buying or you want to use in Azure cost, you can already tell how much it's going to cost you kind of host that resource. So in a nutshell, then this is where you manage costing regarding around your subscription. You see how much you are using, how much you have left, and what's the estimate or the projected estimate for probably the next month. You will see them all here. So, and then if you have created resource group, each subscription now have resource groups. You go to resource groups and you see the list of all the resource groups that you have created within this particular location. And when you click a resource group, also you can also go further. to create resources and see the resources that are inside that particular resource group. So that is how it actually works. Now, I think let's go back to our slide. Any question before we move forward? Any question? Any question?
None for now.
Okay. So I'm going to reshare my screen again, back to my slide. Sorry, seems the thing is trying to re-upload again. Okay. Scroll. Okay. So now let's talk about management group. So I think somehow I've also maybe a bit talk about this in a bit earlier. So management group now is different from resource group, right? Management group can actually help you. What it help you to do is to do what we call governance. Governance in the sense that you can group subscriptions together and apply certain policies on those subscriptions based on who should have access to what and what people can do within the subscription, or based on this particular service is what we want to host with this particular subscription. So in Azure, on the top level is the management groups. And within the management groups, you have different subscriptions. Your subscriptions now can now have different resource group. So in one subscription, like we said earlier, you can have one subscription for development environment, you have one for testing environment, for testing purpose, and then you have a third one for for production. And now, in the production home, you can now create different resource groups. Maybe one resource group is containing resources that are being owned and managed by the IT. By the IT, when I mean IT, I mean the infrastructure people, these administrator people. You can have another resource group that contain all databases for the DB administrators. You can have another resource group that contain all the published applications, developed applications that have now been published to production, for the developers. You can have another resource group, that contain maybe other things like management services or other tools that you are using that you just want to have a dedicated subscription or resource group for. Then within that resource group, you can now have your resources. Now, if you go to this management and you give permission to a user, you can give permission to a user to have even right to manage all the way from the management. What happened is that permission traveled down. It travels down, but now you can break it and say, okay, user one cannot have permission to the management group, but it can have permission to a particular subscription within that management group. So if you have access to subscription, you can give access to that subscription level. If you give subscription level, it means the person will have access to all the resources to manage that particular subscription in its entirety. And then you can also further break down to say this permission that you want to give or management to this particular group of people or user, it's only stop at the resource group level. So even if you have multiple resource groups within a subscription, whatever resource group that you have given that person access to is the resource group is going to be able to, and automatically the resources. And you can also create or configure your permission or your governance to be on resource level. So it means I'm giving a user access to just a resource within a resource group. So that means it doesn't have access to every resources in that resource group, only one resource, even if I have 10 there, but it's only giving access to just one resource group. So it's like a tree for management that allow you to travel down different level depending on how granular you really want to go in terms of management of the resources that you have in Azure. And a resource group can manage, you can have 1,000 management groups. That's, you can have up to 10,000 management groups within a single Active Directory. If it's going beyond that, then you'll have to span your subscription to kind of maybe split it. And then the management group tree can support up to 6 level, So so that's that regarding resource group. It's already 8 o'clock, and we haven't even really gone so far, but let's see. Okay, do you mind, do I continue or I stop here? What do you advise?
Looking at the rates where people are just not sure with that much again in the meeting, and maybe perhaps they do have some other things to do. I don't know.
Okay, so let's stop here and then continue next week. So right now, I have labs that you're going to be doing for this module 2. What I'm going to do also is to drop, I can drop that like immediately, is to drop the lab for that particular module in the chat. Excuse me. So don't worry, I'm going to upload the file. Where is it? Share from my computer. Yeah. So we have mode 2 for you to create a virtual machine in the portal. So it's been uploaded. So I will encourage us to kind of try it out. If you have, is uploading rather. If you have any question, you can kind of drop on the chat. I will check it regularly to kind of respond to your question. And where I'm chanced, maybe the day you are working, where I'm chanced, we can kind of connect to walk through it together. So that will be all from my side for today, and we'll continue next week from here. Any questions so far?
Thank you so much for the class. From my end, I don't have any question. Just to appreciate your time and the explanation given so far.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I wouldn't want to take any more of your time. So, like I said, we'll continue from here next week. And if you have any,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome. If you have anything at all, any issue or any error while you are trying out your lab, you can let me know. I'll try to attend to you or help you look into it.